Today I'm with Kevin Mcgee, who's the Chief Executive Officer of East Lancashire Hospitals Trust, one of the largest trusts in the northwest of England. It provides community and acute services to patients across Pennine, Lancashire. Now, Kevin, we meet today on the 1st of December, a day which must be proving difficult for all trusts up and down the country. And today was to have been the first in a series of planned strikes by junior doctors, averted at the last hour by the government. My question is, as a trust, even though the strike has been averted, surely the damage has been caused. Your public messages are very much business as usual, but you will have had to cancel planned admissions and outpatient clinics, both perhaps for today and for any planned strikes. So, how have you communicated this to patients, and how much disruption has this caused to your trust and to the patients?
So, as you say, Russ, we have been planning for this for a number of weeks now. We've kept disruption to a minimum. Certainly we notified all patients about any cancellations, both in terms of elective inpatients and in terms of outpatients. I have to say all emergency work has been supported, and all, if you like, cancer work has also been dealt with and made sure everybody was treated. So disruption has been kept very much to a minimum. What I have to say is that the junior doctors themselves were very supportive and responsive in terms of working with us in terms of the planning, and our senior clinical staff, be that doctors, nurses and other groups of staff, have also been very, very responsive. So what we've done, we've stepped down all routine meetings, all study leave, etc., and everybody's been focused upon patient care and patient treatment. So disruption has been kept to a minimum, although we have had some cancellations of outpatients and elective work.
The Trust has made significant investment over the last few months, both in staffing and in equipment. Talk us through your new robot, which has revolutionised prostate surgery.
Yeah, this is something that we're really, really proud of. We made a big decision going back a number of months that we're going to invest close to £1.5 million in new robotic equipment, and basically, I'm not technical in this respect, but basically it, driven by one of our senior urology consultants, it undertakes very, very precise and very, very detailed surgical urological activity. The outcomes are much better because it's less invasive technology and work, and patient satisfaction as well as the clinical outcomes has been first rate. So this is a service that we're really, really proud of. It's the first in Lancashire and Cumbria. We want to offer it eventually to all patients across Cumbria and Lancashire. And really this is an area where Lancashire has been behind the game. So most parts of the country offers robotic surgery now. Lancashire has never been able to do this, and we were really proud to be able to be the first trust in Lancashire to be able to take this service and offer it to the residents of East Lancashire, but as I say, also wider, hopefully across Lancashire and Cumbria.
Is that the way you see surgery going? Perhaps, obviously, you don't have a clinical background, but is that the way, as a chief executive, you see services going, bringing more technology in?
I think that's absolutely right. So if you think about the robot, currently it's being used for urology, but there is a view that it can be used for a lot more surgery. So one of the things we're looking to do is to get the best international training. So we're thinking about where do we send our guys to get the best training, because some of this work is more advanced, say in the United States or in parts of Scandinavia, and they do it, it's not just urology, it's for gynecology, it's for general surgery, it's other areas. So what we're looking to do is seeing where it's undertaken best on an international basis, because our residents in East Lancashire deserve the very best, not just nationally but internationally, and we're looking to get our guys trained up wherever that may be.
Staffing. You've recently taken on more staff. How have you achieved this, given the pressure on your finances?
So it's always a difficult balance. So if you think about my job every day is to balance quality and safety with money, with performance and operational targets. And there are times when we have to invest in more staffing if I think that's appropriate, even though the money may be tight. So we have made some very brave decisions about how we invest in staff, because it's the right thing to do to improve our quality and safety in the organisation. That doesn't take away that there's still not a need to do more in terms of finances, and we are looking at how we become more efficient and more effective going forward, and there will be savings that we need to continually make. but I will not make savings and financial savings at the expense of quality and safety in the organisation. And if there's a need from a quality and safety perspective to invest in staff, I will absolutely do so.
I'd like to keep our focus on staffing, and in particular agency staff. Whilst you've made significant investment in staffing, isn't it true that your bill for agency staff, like that of others right across the country, is increasing year on year, and that this not only has a negative impact on your finances, but a very real impact on your ability as a trust to provide continuity of care to the patients?
So this is a difficult one. It is true that in this trust and in most acute trusts up and down the country, agency staffing has been going up year on year. This year, interestingly, we've working nationally to put caps on what we pay for agency rates, and our estimation this year is actually that agency costs will go down, although still high. Now, we only employ agency staff where there is a clinical need. So you can argue very strongly that actually having agency staff helps us from a clinical perspective. If you were then to ask me, well, would I rather have permanent staff in those posts? Then yes, I would, because you've got the continuity of care. But one of the things that we are dealing with in the NHS is people's lifestyle choices. So a lot of staff, quite rightly, choose to now be agency staff because it gives them more flexibility of where they work, how they work, and when they work. And they want that. It's a lifestyle choice. So, for a lot of staff, the days when they would come in and they would work, the standard shifts, day in, day out, year in, year out, they can't do that, and they don't want to do that. They want to be more flexible. So there's times when they would work, 6 or 7 days in a row. There'd be other weeks when they'd want to have more time off because it fits with their family commitments, and we need to recognise that and support that.
But surely, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, of course I'm a patient, and I wouldn't expect you to comment on staff, agency or otherwise in what I'm going to say next, but if staff choose to be agency staff, then we're all fishing from the same pool. So surely that is having a knock-on effect on the amount of staff that there is available in the NHS generally.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do on a national basis, and this is something I really support, is not to allow hospitals to get picked off. So, we all up the rates for agency staff, so we're in competition. So what we've done on a national basis now in the NHS is that there are very tight caps on the levels of pay that you can pay for agency staff. And I think what that's going to do is help us so that we won't be in competition with one another. And I think that's really, really important. So some level of agency staff is good because it gives us flexibility, and there's periods when, particularly in the winter, when we need to open additional beds, and it's great to be able to staff them with agency. We don't need those beds open all the year, so we know we don't need to employ those agency staff during the summer. So some flexibility is good for us. I think what we need to do, though, is probably reduce the overall reliance on agency staff in the NHS. And we are doing that ourselves by what we call our own bank staff. So this is our own staff who have committed to working additional hours, and we pay them for those additional hours. And that's proving more and more attractive for our staff rather than going on to the agency rates.
Is there one or more particular areas where there has to be a prevalence of agency staff just because of the type of area that it is?
So if you look at the NHS, there are some national shortages in certain areas of the business. So in A&E departments, there is a shortage of A&E nurses and A&E doctors, and so we tend to use more agency staff there. If you look on the care of the elderly wards and some of our acute medical wards, again, there's some national pressures in terms of staffing, and so what we try and do is we use, because we have to, more agency staff in those areas, but we're no different there than any other trust in the country.
We seem to be continually bombarded by messages from the media, and in fact lately from the government, that the levels of care in our hospitals are not perhaps what they should be at weekends and in the evening. What would you say as Chief Executive to those claims?
So in East Lancashire we do quite well, because if you look at the level of senior staff that we have on in the weekends, it's already very high. And I think we do better than most places in terms of trying to provide that weekend and out of hours in the week coverage. Can we do more? Yes, clearly we can do more. And I think one of the things that we're doing is working with our commissioners, the people who provide the money for our services, to try and get some additional resources so that we can put more staff on at weekends and out of hours. So we recognise that there is more that we can do. However, I would just emphasise that I think we do fairly well already in terms of having very senior decision makers, clinical decision makers, that's the doctors, the nurses, physiotherapists, etc., pharmacists, and we have a lot of those people already working right across the weekend and out of hours.
I'd like to turn now to finances, and it's no secret that this trust, like most of the trusts up and down the country, are facing a huge black hole in their finances. How are you going to plug those gaps?
We need to do everything we can internally to be as efficient and effective as we can, and we do know there's more that we can do in those areas. So if you look, the big thing that we're all pushing for in hospitals is to have standardisation of processes and procedures. That's both our clinical procedures and our business procedures, and so that will give us more efficiencies and become more effective. Longer term, I think there are some big things that we need to do. So we need to get much better integration between primary care, between community services, between hospital services, and between social care. There's a lot of duplication in terms of how and where things are done, and we need to try and join that up. If we need to go further than that, then we do need to start having some really difficult conversations as a health and social care system about what services can we afford. So I get services I provide, we get funded out of public taxation. I only get so much money every year. Once I've got to the point where I've done all I can in terms of being efficient and effective, if that still then means I don't have enough money, we then do have to get into some quite difficult conversations about, so what services do we want to provide in East Lancashire? I think we're at a point now where we do need to look at how and where we provide services, but I don't think that's negative. Actually, I think we can do things in a slightly different way, but in a better way. So if you look at the health outcomes for the population right across East Lancashire, we actually have some of the worst health outcomes and some of the worst health deprivation in the country. You look at life expectancy for both males and females, it's lower in East Lancashire than it is in the rest of the country. So we need to do some things differently, and I think if we have a proper debate that engages all our communities in terms of what the services should look like, I'm hoping that we can get to a real consensus about what we do, how we do it, and where we do it from.
I suppose really you've preempted my next question, which is it not true that politicians and perhaps those that provide health and social care are going to have to come clean about the state that the NHS finances are in, and that for you at East Lancashire Trust, aren't you going to have to perhaps deliver some difficult messages to patients and service users?
So what we're currently doing is looking at options based upon what money we think we're going to get over the next 3 to 5 years. And we need to look at what that money looks like and what the services are looking like. So health services continually change. It was really interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I was out at Accrington Victoria Hospital. And if you go back to the 1980s, that was a fully functioning district general hospital. So I had maternity wards, I had paediatric, I had theatres, as well as the outpatients and other diagnostic services. Today it's a really valuable hospital. It's a community hospital providing very different services. So what we've done has changed considerably over the years, and it will continue to change over the years. Doesn't mean it's going to be any worse. It just means that it needs to be lived in a slightly different way. I think one of the things we're going to start seeing in the NHS going forward, or in terms of health going forward, is much more people making informed choices about their own care. So, self-care or care in the community, because it is inappropriate always for people to come into hospitals. A lot of care that currently takes place in hospitals can take place in community settings or in their own home, patient's own home. And it's really important that we do that, because that's actually what people want. They don't want to come into hospital. It's inconvenient. It's not appropriate. You should only come into hospital when it really is the last resort and there's no other options. So we will see, I think, over the next sort of 5-10 years, some radical changes in how and where healthcare is delivered. And you'll see that in the NHS, you'll see it right across the UK, and you'll see it internationally.
On the back of what you've just said, why do you think it is that people think it is perfectly acceptable to turn up to a hospital accident and emergency to receive treatment? Obviously, it's a bit of a political hot potato when you consider that some people can't get GP appointments. But even then, why is it you think people tend to come to the hospital?
That's a really difficult one to answer. All I can say is that when we talk to patients and their relatives, sitting in accident and emergency departments, and we ask them, why have you come here? Why are you waiting? You could have gone to see your GP or something. The response we normally get back is that, well, at least we know we will get seen. It might take us longer than we would hope, but we know we will get seen, and we'll know that the care will be good and will be what we need. So I think for people it's a choice that they know that they would rather wait that little bit longer, but know they're going to get the treatment and get good treatment.
Do you think, like me, it would surprise people to learn how much it costs per individual patient to come to hospital, to have a GP appointment? Do you think displaying those charges might help?
I do think we need to be much more open and much more clear about where people should be treated and how people should be treated and the cost of that various treatment. Yeah, I think that would be a very, very good thing to do. I mean, I think we've got to get away from the NHS being, like an illness service, to the NHS very much being more about how we support people to maintain their health and fitness. And I think what we do, particularly in terms of hospital, what we're really good at doing is when people are ill, when people are at the lowest, we care for people and we give them the appropriate treatment and we deal with it with dignity and respect and the highest level of professionalism. And that's right, and that will always be a core function of the NHS. But I think more and more, there's recognition that the other aspect of what we should be in is actually trying to keep people out of hospital and trying to keep people well. And I think we'll see more emphasis on that over the coming years.
Okay, so as the winter settles in, there are obviously very real pressures on every organisation which provides healthcare and which obviously is going to struggle to meet demand. Do you worry about meeting that demand, and how have you prepared the Trust to cope?
So for many weeks and months now, we've been planning for winter. We've got a very, very detailed winter plan which has additional staff that we're putting in place. We've opened additional capacity of beds where appropriate, and we're working very, very closely with primary care, GPs, etc., to put an additional capacity. So the whole system is working really closely together to prepare for winter. So I'm as confident as we possibly can be that we're in a good place. The other thing that we've just done, and you probably heard me talking about on previous conversations we've had, is our new acute medical unit, which has given us more capacity in the organisation and allows us to deal with the pressures through winter. So I am as confident as I can be. However, and there always has to be a however, what none of us can legislate for is clearly what the weather's going to be like, whether we get an outbreak, a really big national outbreak of flu or something like of that nature. So we are really confident that we can cope this winter. However, we always have to be vigilant for the unexpected, such as really adverse weather conditions, such as flu outbreaks and pandemics.
It's obviously widely accepted that accident and emergency departments across the NHS are not meeting targets set by government. What exactly are these targets, and why aren't hospitals meeting them?
So the main target that we need to meet is that when somebody comes into our accident and emergency department, from being booked in to decision to either discharge or to admit into a ward or into a bed, they have to be seen, and that has to all be done within 4 hours. So that's the target. And what we all have to achieve is that 95% of all patients should be seen within that target. That 5% is meant to give you leeway, because there are some clinical exceptions whereby it would be impossible and it would be wrong for clinical reasons to see people within that 4-hour target. So that's why I set it 95%. Unfortunately, because when we get a very, very busy A&E department, because we only have a certain number of staff on at any one moment, because we only have a certain number of physical cubicles in which we can see patients, there are occasions when we get very, very busy and it's not always possible to see that 95% of patients within that 4 hours. I have to say we do better than most trusts. We the last couple of weeks we've hit the 95%, and we tend to sort of be between the sort of the margins of 93 to 97. We tend to hit within there, whereas some trusts can go a lot of trusts go much lower in terms of performance. So overall, our performance is not bad. It does need to be better, and it can be better. So what we're looking to do is to look at, can we flex our staffing so that when we think we're going to get really busy periods, Can we get more staff in? The other thing that can slow us down and can impact on that target is, so if you think about the front door, the numbers of people coming in, that can affect it. But also then, when we make the decision that somebody needs a bed, in winter, beds can be very pressurised. And there are times when we can't always make a bed available within that 4 hours. So what we then need to do is to make sure that we can treat those patients, put them somewhere and keep them safe, keep them warm, keep them clinically safe. And then when a bed becomes available, then we transfer them into the appropriate ward. So the 95% target can be affected by people coming in the front door, or our ability then to transfer patients into beds if we're under pressure on beds. And I do think it's important that people remember that this 4-hour target is all embracing. So it's about people coming in, being seen, being treated, and being discharged or transferred to a ward for a bed.
You were recently inspected by the CQC, or should I say, to be more correct, various departments were inspected by the CQC. Are you able to share any information about that inspection? Have you received any reports back?
So we've not received the report back yet, but I'm hopeful that we will get the report before Christmas. And we have been notified that we will have what is called a quality summit towards the end of January. So that quality summit will be the official vehicle to receive the report from the CQC, and after that date it will be made public. I haven't had the report, but I'm still very, very hopeful, knowing the services that we provide and how well we deliver those services, and knowing the feedback that we got just verbally through the visit, that we will get a good CQC report.
The Trust recently took the decision to move fracture clinics from Burnley General Hospital to the Royal Blackburn Hospital. And you told me that this was a trial for 6 months. Could you tell me how the fracture clinic is performing now, and whether that department is delivering safe, effective care?
So we are going to do, and we are running a full evaluation of how successful or otherwise the transfer has been. What I can say to date is that the waiting times previously could have been up to 14 days when we had the service in Burnley. It's now 24 hours, and the patient satisfaction feedback that we've had has generally been very, very good. So we do need, I don't want to prejudge this, we do need to do a full evaluation about whether it's been successful or not, and then we'll have the conversations and engagement about whether we transfer or not on a permanent basis. But I have to say that, we made the change for good clinical reasons. It wasn't for finances, or it wasn't for, because we just felt it was appropriate. It was for good clinical reasons. So if you take the example, a medical director will always use the example that, if you had a kiddie who had fractured the wrist, and he came into the urgent care centre in Burnley the day after the clinic, he could then, or she may have to wait 13 more days for clinic if they were going to be seen in Burnley. By that time, the fracture could have started to knit inappropriately, whereas now they would be transferred and asked to attend the clinic in Blackburn. They would be seen within 24 hours, and it would stop any complications setting in. So clinically, there was very strong and sound reasons for doing it. It wasn't a management decision, it wasn't a financial decision, it was based on sound clinical reasons and advice from the clinical staff.
Looking forward, are you confident that the Trust will be able to meet the rising demand for healthcare? And what would your message be to the patients of East Lancashire in how they use what is obviously a very limited resource? How can we, the patients, help you?
I think that's a really good question, and I do think that we are all in this together. So I only have so much resources that I get through the public purse. We're publicly funded, and we need to use that appropriately. So we do need the help of our communities only to access services when it is appropriate, A&E being a good example. What I don't want to do, however, going forward is to get into lots of fallouts with communities if we try and change services or we try and do things in a different way. My aspiration, and I'm convinced we can get there, is to make the health and social care systems across East Lancashire the very best in the country. Bar none. We want people to think, when they think of East Lancashire, they've got the best health and social care system. And I think with a fair wind over the next 5 years, we can do so. But I can't do that alone. The Trust can't do that alone. My staff can't do that alone. We have to do that by having an alliance of all our communities and everybody supporting us. So that means only using the services appropriately and when needed. Also getting behind us and supporting us when is appropriate. telling us when we've got things wrong, because that's how we learn, and that's how we improve. But then when we have to have the conversations about what the services look like in future, let's do it in a way that we're all in it together. I don't want to be fighting local pressure groups, local communities, local politicians about what the services look like. I want to be having conversations, grown-up conversations about, we've only got so many staff, we've only got so much resources, how do we do this in the best way possible? And that has to be by all of us being in it together.
2016 is obviously going to be a very difficult year for the NHS. Share with me how you personally remain focused and positive in what is a very difficult climate.
So I'm not looking for sympathy, but it is a difficult job and it is a pressurised job. But I have to say I love the job. Quite often I introduce myself when I go into audiences, say, I'm Kevin Mcgee, Chief Executive of East Lancashire Hospitals Trust, and it's a privilege and an honour to say that. And it is a privilege and honour to say that because I have a lot of responsibility, but when you think about what the staff here do, they have the most profound effect on individuals and communities and families' lives. And to be able to influence that in some small way, to be able to support our clinical teams, and it's really humbling going out, talking to the clinical teams, seeing what they do. To be able to support them in any way, shape or form is really humbling. It is an honour to be Chief Executive of East Lancashire Hospitals Trust. And when I do have sort of down days, I only have to go and walk around the wards and departments and see what the teams do there, and that always improves my spirit.
It is almost Christmas, so who with and where will you be spending it? Do you have a traditional Christmas?
So it's a traditional family Christmas, so we'll have lots of family and friends and relatives round on Christmas Day. We tend to make Boxing Day a big day in our family, so all my family, extended family, tend to get together on Boxing Day, and we'll have a big Boxing Day meal and then a few drinks in the evening. And so I like all the traditional stuff, but I also like actually just getting a couple of days where doing nothing and just relaxing and just watching a bit of television and just recharging the batteries. So I have to say I love Christmas. I'm a real softie for Christmas. Not so. I tend to be more reflective and a bit more melancholy at New Year, and probably just have a very quiet New Year. But I love Christmas. It's a real family time.
Okay, Kevin Mcgee, Chief Executive of East Lancashire Hospitals Trust. Let me, on behalf of the patients of East Lancashire, pass on my wishes for a very Merry Christmas to you, to the managers, directors and all the staff here at Christmas on behalf of all the patients across East Lancashire. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ, and thanks for your time, and thanks to all your listeners. Thank you.